All right, guys, welcome into the first Whiteboard Wednesday podcast. My name is Warren Sharp of sharpfootballanalysis.com and of sharpfootballstats.com. The purpose of this Whiteboard Wednesday podcast is a video podcast. It's going to be recorded on YouTube and it's going to be uploaded onto my website, sharpfootballanalysis.com, on the blog page. The goal of this is to allow you guys to visually understand how to utilize Sharp Football Stats on a weekly basis to try to help plan for the upcoming week, regardless of what you're trying to do, whether you're just trying to study matchups and scout an opponent, whether you're trying to study efficiency potentials for either DFS or sports betting. There's a lot of things that you'll be able to utilize this for on a weekly basis. In this particular podcast, I'm going to target 4 key items or topics to discuss with you. Each week we're going to do a different one of these, hopefully, as long as we can maintain that schedule. And what we're going to do each week is study a couple of different examples that's going to show you on a given week how this is going to play into your analysis or your study of these matchups. So the point being here, instead of I've already got tutorials on every single offensive visualization showing you how to utilize this particular page. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, for instance, when we're walking through this, showing you how, describing what every single drop-down menu does on a particular visualization or describing all the intricacies of a particular visualization. I'm assuming you can do that on your own when you go to that page. You can feel free to ask me any questions on my Twitter handle @sharpfootball. But the purpose of this is going to be to look at specific studies and show you guys how you can customize and then visualize this information. I'm going to upload this just as a FYI into iTunes so that you can hear the audio on the Sharp Football Analysis podcast stream. Obviously, when you're not looking at the video, it's not going to be quite as easy to follow along. I'm going to try to take that into consideration as I'm speaking about each of the visualizations to try to help you guys if you're not following along on YouTube at the website, sharpfootballanalysis.com blog, that, basically you're still going to be able to get something out of this to help you this upcoming week. It's just not going to be quite the same if you're not seeing it. With that said, let's go to the offensive tab because I want to go ahead and discuss the first overall offensive visualization that we want to dive into here. But basically, you're going to be able to look at the passing, receiving, rushing, efficiency, success, toxicity, and play frequency visualizations all in one shot here. And the same is actually true defensively. If you click on the defensive tab, you're going to be able to see all of them pop up here. The purpose of this, obviously, as you know, I believe that you guys and myself are more inclined to be visual learners. And so when we remember, hey, I saw this really cool visualization at Sharp Football Stats, but when I go up to the menu, I'm not sure what exactly it was called. Is it this explosive passes visualized, or is it the situational success rates and ranks? I don't really know which it is. This is going to make everything a lot easier. Maybe you have a way your brain mentally remembered what it looked like, so instantly you're going to get a sense of what these look like. And obviously, if you hover over one of these icons, regardless of where you are, you'll be able to see the name of that page to kind of put words with images. But the other thing that you can do, let's say efficiency/success, you want to look at a visualization here, you're not sure which one it is. You click on any of these and it'll blow it up in a larger view so that you can get a better look at what exactly this visualization is. And you can then use your left and right arrows to toggle through the various different visualizations on this level. So right now we're looking at efficiency success. So you can toggle through and see which one exactly that you want to define. In this particular example, I want to talk about NFL offensive success by field zone. And so when you find the one that you want, the bottom right, you can click the little chain link and that'll zoom you directly to that visualization. So in this case, we are looking at the defensive efficiency success, and we're down here at NFL defensive success by field zone. That's different than the team defensive success by field zone. This is one where it's going to let you look at one team at a time. It's going to give you more things to look at, but it's only one team. Here we're looking at league-wide. And in particular, what I want to look at here, the other thing to note, I mentioned this before, but the zoom level is important. If I'm zoomed in at 100, I'm going to see the column headers line up directly where they should over the different columns. If I was zoomed in a little bit too much, then these headers are going to get out of whack and shifted off to the right. That's okay, and it might be easy enough for you to figure out what's what, but you zoom back to 100, you'll see instantly, and that's what I'm at right now is 100. I want to tell you guys a little bit about the defense of the Atlanta Falcons. If you look here overall, you can see that the Atlanta Falcons defense right now ranks 28th overall in success rate allowed. They've played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Oakland Raiders so far. They're 1-1 obviously in their games, but their defense overall, their success rate allowed is 28th in the NFL. Now, I like looking at success rate, as I've mentioned to you guys before. It basically eliminates excess yardage, additional yardage. So there's other ways to study additional yardage. Obviously, you can look at explosive plays, and we have that on the website as well. That's part of the toxicity visualizations to look at how explosive an offense is. And that's very important. Let's not try to underestimate or underappreciate the effect and impact explosive offenses have on success overall. But a lot of times stats can get skewed when you're looking at cumulative yardage totals, or even at this point in the season, average yardage totals. And I gave a perfect example of that for the Cleveland Browns rushing offense. They're averaging, like, I think the second most yards per carry in the NFL, but they have the NFL's worst success rate. That's because they've gained a lot of yards on first down. They have like a 75-yard gain, a 60-yard gain. They have these massive gains. There's a handful of them, I think like 5 or 6. But then if you look at what they're doing the vast majority of the time, they are not successful when they're running the football. It's just a few explosive plays that are gaining tremendous amount of yardage. So I mentioned all that in the Sharp Football Show, which is a new Periscope I'm going to be recording every single Monday night. So you can tune into that, and you'll get a better chance to look at some of the stats like that after every single week's games on Sunday. We'll break things down for you heading into the Monday night game. But this one, we're going to focus on the Monday night game this upcoming week. And I want to look at what the Atlanta Falcons defense is doing, particularly against the pass. So, and this is one of my favorite pages, whether it's offensive or defensive, because I get a really good sense as to how efficient a team is compared to the rest of the NFL teams, and I can isolate it by lead or quarter or field zone or anything like that. So right now we're looking at the Atlanta Falcons' success against the passing attack, and you can see it's been pretty bad, particularly down here outside of their own 20-yard line, let's say. It's been very, very bad, such that against the pass, they're 30th in the NFL, and 58% of overall plays that are pass plays against them are graded out as successful. The only other teams worse than that are the Oakland Raiders and the Indianapolis Colts. But if we want to eliminate this 42% rate where they're at their best by far, which is when an opponent is pinned back inside its own 20-yard line, which doesn't happen all that much. So let's go ahead and eliminate that from our view, and we can do that up here in the field zone, because I want to look at what their overall calculation changes to when I do eliminate that. So now that column has disappeared. Now I'm looking at what they do over the course of from their own 20, essentially just outside their own 20, to the end zone. And they have the NFL's worst success rate defending the pass. 61% of pass plays are successful, and that's a pretty large number, especially when you consider Tampa Bay. Obviously Oakland is somewhat of a bigger pass play team. Tampa Bay was hitting a lot of big pass plays against them, but in order to have a good success rate overall, it's not just that they're hitting 40% of their big plays against the Falcons, because that would be a low success rate. They're not only hitting those plays, but they're also being efficient on their smaller, shorter plays as well. So very poor pass numbers for the Falcons, particularly down here when it gets to scoring zone. So it's likely that the New Orleans Saints should be able to move the ball into scoring zone via the pass. Which obviously they faced the New York Giants defense last week, and they have a pretty good overall defense. The Atlanta Falcons here against the pass, not nearly as strong, and actually you can kind of get a sense as to what the Giants have done here. When an opponent gets inside, let's say their side of the field, from the opponent's 41 into the Giants side of the field, the Giants have a very good overall defense, to the point that, let's just look at them as comparison. This is what the Saints faced last week. The Giants down here now inside the 40 are only allowing 40% of pass plays to be successful. That's 9th best in the league. and the Falcons are way up here at 68%. So almost 28% worse are the Atlanta Falcons. So let's go back and look at the Saints offense to try to figure out how these guys might match up. And we go down to the offensive success by field zone for the NFL. And as this page loads, what we're going to find here is that the New Orleans Saints offense has been very good at getting out of its side of the field when passing the ball. The question is going to be how well they are going to perform down inside the red zone. And we know that the Saints played the New York Giants last week, who, as we mentioned, have a pretty good pass defense overall. And they played the Oakland Raiders the week before. But if you look at the Saints when they're trying to matriculate the ball here, this is where they've struggled, is down inside the red zone a little bit. They're 11th overall, but they've struggled a little bit down here inside the red zone and inside the opponent's 40-yard line, passing the ball effectively. So I think that the Saints are going to have success getting into the Falcons' territory using the pass. It's just a matter of if now they can capitalize on that bad pass defense by the Atlanta Falcons down inside the Falcons' red zone, and if the Saints are able to, convert some of those into touchdowns, whereas they haven't had as much success before. So that's that look at that visualization. You guys can take that and run with it. There's a lot of other filters that you can do, and you can look at different quarters or downs and distance. You can look at how much the lead is, whether it's a one-score game or whatnot. A lot of different things to do. The other thing that I want to look at real quick is the play frequency. For that one, again, you can always click on the main play frequency or main column header here, and it's going to pop up whatever visualization you want to look at for that particular category. So I want to look at the overall situational run-pass ratios. In particular, one thing that I kind of mentioned before on the Sharp Football Show that I'll go ahead and bring up here in this video podcast is the Cincinnati Bengals and how often they've had to pass the football. Week 1, obviously they played the Jets. They weren't able to run the ball effectively, so they had to pass it a fair amount. And week 2, they played the Steelers, who also have a good run defense, and they ended up passing the ball a lot there too. This week they play the Denver Broncos, and the Denver Broncos yet again have a very good defense. Now, if you look at overall in the first half, and let's open this up all the way, the offensive margin overall in the first half, the Bengals are passing the ball more than any other team in the NFL at a 75% clip. Now, what this middle column here shows you is it shows you the overall total volume in terms of play calls and how that ranks given these scenarios. So, for example, my filters right now are selected to look only at the first half, and that's it. So everything else is wide open. I'm just looking at the first half. You could see here, for example, that a team like the New England Patriots, they've run 78 total plays in the first half. That's the #1 most plays run in the first half. And they've been very balanced, 46 pass attempts, 32 run attempts. And that's actually slightly below the NFL average in terms of pass rate. If you look at a team like, here, let's say the Washington Redskins, okay, they're the second most pass-heavy team, but they're still only 52 pass plays. And that's in large part, I mean, we can dig into that totally another time, but they get put into third down a lot. They pass the ball a ton on third down, and they are very inefficient when doing so. And therefore, they don't get to run a lot of plays because they're having to lose the ball. And actually, we can just look at that just for the hell of it right now and look at what the Redskins do on third down in terms of their run-pass ratio. And you can see here, just in the first half, they've had 10 third downs in the first half, and every single time they've passed the ball. Over the course of the entire game, they have had 22 third downs, and 21 times they've passed the ball. So, I mean, what do you think when defenses go to try to game plan against these guys? 95% of the time they're passing the ball on third down. The NFL average is 81%. Obviously, it's a higher average because teams on third down oftentimes, will need to try to pass the ball because it's just inconceivable to try to run the ball on 3rd and 9 or something like that if you really want to try to achieve a first down. So it's going to be skewed, but 95% is a little bit out of whack. Also should tell you here about the Buffalo Bills all the way down at 70%, well below the NFL average. These guys just have not been trusting Tyrod Taylor to throw the football at all, even in situations that they should be more so inclined to let him throw the ball. But getting back to the cool thing about this page in general that I like, with same thing with the rest of the site, is how quick. I mean, you can see how easy it is to just jump around to these things. You don't have to sit there and run these lengthy filters and look at all these things. It's very quick to toggle around. But let's look at all the downs, and let's look at just the first 3 quarters. Sometimes I like looking at just the first 3 quarters, and I like to look at when the game is within 1 score. So I'm going to change this to an offensive margin -8 to 8, obviously with 2-point conversions. And I want to see what the likelihood of teams running or passing is, excluding fourth quarters, because that's when, even if you're up by 3 points or 8 points in the fourth quarter, you still might call the game offensively a little bit differently than you would if it was in the first half and that was the score, or even into the third quarter. You could still see that the Cincinnati Bengals are the most pass-heavy team in the NFL. Why I wanted to mention this real quickly is just because of the fact that when you look at the Denver Broncos, this is a very good pass rush, and Andy Dalton is potentially gimpy this week. They know that they have not had much success at all running the football. We could look at that visualization if you wanted to, but I'm going to skip over to some others. But you can look at the efficiency of the Cincinnati Bengals running the football. It's not very good. Again, this is something I touched on the Sharp Football Show on Monday night. But they're passing the ball a lot, which means a lot of dropbacks for Andy Dalton, a lot of opportunities for that opposing pass rush to get after him. And that is a concern if he can't move around a little bit in the pocket. We know he was sacked 7 times against the Jets week 1, and week 2, it wasn't quite as bad against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they right now have the NFL's worst pass rush efficiency. So it's extremely important that they protect Andy Dalton well enough if they are going to go with a more pass-heavy approach, because the run game is ineffective, for them to protect him so that he can stay upright, and especially with him being kind of injured there on his lower leg. So that's a look at the situational run-pass ratios and some things you can take away from that. Let's go to one of the passing visualizations on offense. And again, we can just click the overall offensive tab. And I want to show you the passer rating. And actually, in this case, I don't want to go by team. I want to go by quarterback. So let's look at the passer rating table by quarterback, which is part of the offensive passing visualization. And one thing that I want to look at here when we talk about the New York Jets versus the Kansas City Chiefs is the fact that the New York Jets obviously have been susceptible defensively to the big plays over the top. They gave up a number of those to the Buffalo Bills. They gave up a number of those to the Cincinnati Bengals. That's ultimately how Cincinnati won that game. As I mentioned, Andy Dalton was sacked 7 times, and they couldn't run the football. So you think, well, a ton of pass rush and you can't run the football, this is going to be a good day for the defense. But the reality was, when he was letting go of the ball, I think it was 22 of 33, had a ridiculous high, like 11 yards per attempt, and they were getting huge chunk plays that way. And that's how they ultimately won that game. The way that Buffalo was keeping that game close after it looked like they might get blown out is through hitting some of these big pass plays. Remember, the first score that they had was a deep pass, I think it was to Goodwin down the sideline, beating Darrelle Revis. And then after that, they were still trying to hit on a number of really big pass plays. So if that's the recipe right now, if it's a little bit more difficult to run the ball against the Jets, they're going to have to go over the top against them. And so they're playing the Chiefs this week, and well, lo and behold, we're looking at Alex Smith. How good is Alex Smith passing the ball deep down the field? Because overall, if we find him on this list, where was he? Who's right here? You could see he's 20th in the league based on passer rating. He's got a 57% success rate, only 7.6 yards per attempt, which is still, not terrible. It's better than some quarterbacks, although it's not outrageously good. And 69% completion rate, which is pretty good, but obviously sort of also could tell you that he's not really pushing the ball too far down the field. So actually, that was looking at the fourth quarter. Let's reset this to overall numbers. Where is he now? Alex Smith, here he is. So 66% completion rate, so it's dropped a tiny bit from what I was mentioning earlier. Still 22nd, I think it was 20th before when we just focused in on the fourth quarter. A 50% success rate from the pass. And so what I want to do here, though, is I want to look at what Alex Smith does when he's passing the ball deep. So you can look at that on their pass location, and I'm going to uncheck the short left, short middle, and short right on their pass location. And so now I'm left with only the deep passes. And we can see here that overall, if you look at Alex Smith, where is this guy? Down here. He's 5 of 14 on deep passes, a 96 passer rating, which is 18th in the NFL. Only 36% success rate. And you can see most of these guys that are up here above him, a much better success rate on their deep pass shot. So he's not very successful. But 14 isn't that bad. You know, he is trying to throw the ball down the field. That's what it looks like on the surface. But when you dig a little bit deeper, the key is, keep in mind, he was down by 10 points at halftime and after 3 quarters to the Houston Texans. So he's down by double digits. He's in comeback mode. He was down big to the San Diego Chargers in week 1. Again, he had to be in comeback mode. Let's pretend that he's at home this week, which he is, and they're favored by 3 points. What is he going to play like if he's not in comeback mode? Well, the best way to look at that, as I've mentioned before, you could take this team lead, and I want to isolate this to just 1-score games. So when the game is within 1 score, let's look at what the plays are in terms of how frequently they are throwing the ball down the field. And again, I like to sometimes rule out the fourth quarter, because that's when a team, even though they're within 1 score, might get desperate in the fourth quarter because there's not much time left and they might be chucking it more so than usual. You can see here a number of quarterbacks who are pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Aaron Rodgers, Andy Dalton, Ben Roethlisberger, Carson Palmer. These are names that we kind of expect, maybe not Ryan Fitzpatrick necessarily, but a lot of these guys do have double-digit attempts down the field with varying degrees of success. Scroll all the way down. There is Alex Smith, way down at 3 total pass attempts when the game is within 1 score in the first 3 quarters of the game. And the point being here is that he is not pushing the ball down the field unless necessary. He doesn't have the receiving threats. They don't generally design the plays to do that. They aren't intentionally attempting to attack the defense often that way. And on those 3 attempts, he's 0 of 3. So obviously, you know, that's tied for, well, he's not quite as bad in this case, surprisingly enough, Russell Wilson, because he's thrown an interception, has a worse passer rating. But Alex Smith is tied with Ryan Tannehill for guys that don't throw the ball down the field very much and have had no success in doing so unless they've needed to when the game gets out of hand a little bit more. So from that perspective, it is going to be a little bit challenging to envision how the Kansas City Chiefs are going to attack the weakness of the New York Jets, which is in their pass secondary. A couple more visualizations here in the final 7 minutes before we cap this thing at 30 minutes. I want to go ahead and look at, actually, I think we're down to our last one. We just talked about the passing of Alex Smith. Let's look at rushing efficiency. So I'll go to the overall rushing efficiency tab. And one team that I want to study who has been very run-based and has said that they want to be this exotic smash-mouth team is the Tennessee Titans. And first I want to look at their directional rushing success to get a better idea of how successful they are and who is being the most successful, because we know they've got DeMarco Murray, who had varying degrees of success last year. He was at his best in short yardage. He was the best in the NFL last year in short yardage situations, but he struggled elsewhere. And they, of course, have the outstanding rookie from Alabama that is obviously going to be, in terms of Derrick Henry, obviously going to be trying to occupy some, you know, of those carries moving forward as the season progresses. They maybe will go with the hot hand or the guy that's producing the best. So in this particular visualization, you can immediately see which guy has been the most effective and on which down he's been the most effective. And Derrick Henry has by far been more efficient in terms of his overall success rate than has DeMarco Murray, particularly on first and second down. He's not getting as many carries, and he's gotten all the third down work, if you note, all the third down work for Tennessee, but he has not been effective overall. Now, interesting that I mentioned DeMarco Murray was the best short yardage rusher in the NFL last year, and he was extremely effective on third and short. They haven't given him a single third and short carry or third down carry at all this year. But let's look at each one of these guys to get a sense of where they're running and how successful they are. So Derrick Henry, you can see his success rate. He's not running to the right, but he's very successful elsewhere across the line. DeMarco Murray, on the other hand, has been very inefficient running towards the right. He's occasionally busted a couple off to the right. Up the middle, we'll see in a moment using a different visualization where he's gained the most volume in terms of his yards per carry and how often they're utilizing him. So we'll talk a little bit about frequency in a minute with another visualization. But you can see overall success rate very, very poor as compared to Derrick Henry. Now let's look at, we were looking at directional rushing success here. Let's look at directional rushing production. This is where we're going to be able to see frequency, we're going to be able to see success, and we're going to be able to see explosiveness all in one visualization. So here we can see, let's choose Tennessee from the drop-down menu. And Tennessee's obviously has two very good running backs, but they aren't working anybody else into the mix. So it's a timeshare split between these two guys right now for their 39 rushes. Obviously, I'm not including Marcus Mariota into the mix. If we look here, we can see DeMarco Murray, 5.2 yards per carry, which is a lot higher than what Derrick Henry has done, but Derrick Henry has been more successful. So if we just isolate to DeMarco Murray, what we'll get a good idea of is the fact that, remember we said on the prior visualization, only 39% of his rushes up the middle were graded out as successful. But he has 95 rushing yards up the middle on 13 attempts. You can see that's primarily where they are running DeMarco Murray, is right up the gut. Occasionally he's bouncing them to the far left or far right, but primarily he's running right behind the center, up the middle of the behind the offensive line, up the middle. And he's usually not that successful in doing so, but he has broken off a couple of larger runs, and so that's inflating his overall yards per carry tremendously. Now, if we look at what Derrick Henry is in comparison, particularly if you look at the rushing frequency, directional rushing frequency, now we're just looking at Derrick Henry. You can see that while he's yet to have any explosive runs, but he is primarily going to the left of the offensive line, behind the center a little bit and to the left. He's not busting any of them out to the right, and he's staying very consistent, and he's getting decent numbers, 4 yards per carry behind the left tackle, 5 yards per carry behind the left guard. So this is where he's really doing the most of his damage, is to the left side of the offensive line. That's where they're running him the most often, and he's having decent success. Now you can kind of think of this in concert with the Raiders defense, who they're going to face this week, and we'll look at the Raiders defense in terms of their directional rushing production first. And the Oakland Raiders, if you scroll down here, first let's pick them from the drop down. You can see the Oakland Raiders, who they have played in terms of the Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. You can see teams most often are running right up the center at them, and they're having a lot of success in terms of their averages. Where Oakland has been very good at is defending runs out to the right side, to the right edge, bouncing runs out to, the left defensive end. That's where the Raiders have been the most successful. And that's where DeMarco Murray was busting a couple of his runs in that direction. And the Raiders have been very good at stopping those runs, at least so far. But they have not been very good overall, just in general, behind the defensive line. Their defensive line has not been good at all in general. Now, if you look at their success rate, you can, yards per carry, you can see, especially on first downs, they're giving up tremendous yardage here. The Atlanta Falcons obviously had a very good success rate on first down, with Devonta Freeman averaging 6.3 yards per carry and Tevin Coleman averaging 6.0 yards per carry. But even Mark Ingram, who has not had a great start to the season for the Saints, averaged 5.6 yards per carry on first down. So I think this is going to play into what the Titans want to do a lot, and that is run the football on first down, establish positive line of scrimmage, and be able to impose their will a little bit. I think that they will have some success in doing that because the Raiders have been susceptible to that. Granted, they have been playing teams that are able to pass the ball too, like the Falcons and like the Saints. So it's imperative that early in the game, the Tennessee Titans do stay somewhat aggressive and prove that the Raiders are going to have to defend that pass enough. If they get too run heavy, thinking that they can run the ball easily on first down, then the Raiders will probably stack the box a little bit more until the Tennessee Titans force them to beat them. But if we look here at the defensive rushing success rates for the Raiders, let's move to that visualization. We just saw the cumulative numbers there for the Atlanta Falcons and for the Saints against them. But if we want to look at success rates in general, specifically success rates, let's go ahead and select the Oakland Raiders defense here. And you can see that overall, Devonta Freeman and Mark Ingram, the two guys with the most carries, respectively, for each team, 59% success and 58% success. Very strong success numbers. Overall, if you look at where they were running the ball, not great numbers in terms of like around 50% for the most part across the entire line. But those 50% runs, a lot of their lower successes coming here on the later downs, second down or third down in particular, for Tevin Coleman specifically. And they're actually giving up a lot of yardage on first and second down. We saw these guys yardage-wise, success rate-wise, being very successful. So I think that does help the Tennessee Titans in this matchup. It'll keep the Oakland Raiders offense off the field and allow Tennessee to establish the run and then be able to pass off of that. So this is just one example there. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this this podcast. It's the first one. We're at 32-minute mark now. Just want to go ahead and tell you guys, head on over to sharpfootballstats.com. There's obviously way more than this there, and there's a lot of things that you can do and customize and research. Hopefully you can see here, I was doing this from your perspective. I was doing this as if I was sitting there on your end, using the access and just accessing it through the internet as you guys would. So the overall delay, I'm pretty comfortable with how quick it is responsive. When you're changing a lot of filters and things like that, it still is popping up pretty effectively. So I'm very pleased with where the site is currently. Obviously, any suggestions that you guys have, feel free to shoot them my way on Twitter. Feel free to shoot them my way using the contact box here. I've gotten some decent suggestions already. Again, even if it's a good suggestion, it may not get implemented right away. It may get on my to-do list for when I have time to implement that. I'm obviously very busy right now, but I am looking at developing a couple of matchup-based visualizations that we're going to be able to easily isolate matchups, specifically, rushing defense versus rushing offense and things like that on a singular page. But it's not the end of the world to try to toggle back and forth between the offense and defense and kind of match things up yourself, like we were just doing as examples. I was giving you some examples there for the Atlanta Falcons pass defense versus the Saints pass offense, and we're also looking there at the Tennessee Titans rush offense versus the Oakland Raiders rush defense. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We'll be back each week. Again, feel free to give me suggestions onto this particular podcast as well as the website in general. Is there any questions you guys have about using the website? Any other things that you need explained a little bit better? Maybe I can tackle a couple of questions on this podcast next week. With that said, hopefully you guys have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the football game between the Houston Texans and the New England Patriots, and we'll talk to you guys later.